Wheels, Classics and Collections is made possible in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota, and by members of Pioneer PBS. Thank you.
My name is Greg Korfe. I live in Long Prairie, Minnesota. And I own a '76 Grand Torino Starsky and Hutch edition. I was working with a friend of mine down at Winnebago Mobile Home down at Forest City, Iowa. We got off work at 1 o'clock in the morning, and on the way out to our trailer house, we go by the Ford garage, and this car came in on the top of the semi-rack, brand new, into the Ford garage. And my buddy kind of nudged me and says, "Hey, there's that TV car." And we thought, hey, that's kind of cool, you know, not thinking nothing of it. Well, the next day, about noon, we went to town to get some groceries, and we drive by the Ford garage, and there it sat, brand new, sitting out front. So of course we had to stop and take a look at it and nose around on it. And guy came out from the shop and he said, "Hey boys, we just got this car in brand new. You want to take it for a spin?" And I go, "Hell yeah, I'll take it for a spin." And buddy hopped in the back, he hopped next to me, and we went out cruising around, and I kind of drove it like I stole it because I wanted to see what this thing would do. And we got back and I just fell in love with the car. And I just told him, write it up, I'm buying it. I was 2 years out of school. I had 72 O's Cutlass I got for graduation in '74. So I traded off my 72 O's Cutlass, and I had myself a brand new '76 Grand Torino Starsky and Hutch limited edition. And I was the happiest camper you could ever believe. I went into service in the fall of '76. I joined the Army, parked the car in my dad's garage, and I sent money home to Dad every month when I got paid. When I got out of the service in '78, my car was paid for and I had a brand new car paid for. It's unique. When I bought it, I was told they only made 1,000 of these cars. The Ford Motor Company in the spring of '76, they produced 1,000 of these Starsky and Hutch cars to commemorate the TV show, because the TV show Starsky and Hutch was such a popular TV show. So they made 1,000 of them. This here I made for the younger generation so they know what Starsky and Hutch is. And then the police badges for the original TV program. And this here document, this is my original bill of sale the day I bought it. This is the original build sheet that proves it's a factory Starsky and Hutch. And this kind of tells about my car, number 56 of the first 100 with the C6, the 460 motor. So I put this out on car shows. Now I've got a 460 Police Interceptor in mine with a C6 transmission, heavy duty wiring, heavy duty rear end. Was told that they only made 100 of them with that to commemorate the show because it was a TV cop car show. So I've got one of 100 of 1,000 cars made. On the door panel on my car, it says 220056, so I'm assuming I got number 56. Now I've got my factory build sheet that proves it's a factory Starsky and Hutch car, and it says on there, factory Starsky and Hutch PS 122. So by all accounts, I've got one of the original 1,000 Starsky and Hutch cars made. My son got me the little bubble red light I put up on top to make it look like the car show. But that's just all part of the fun and the atmosphere of the car, you know, I mean, because it is an iconic TV car. So you got to have the red bubble up there to make it look like a cop car. And I don't go to car show to win a trophy. I go to car shows to show people my car and to talk about the car, because I just like talking about my car, you know. And people are my age, they remember it, and they just like asking me about it, and they remember it and saying, oh, I wanted one of them when I was a kid. But you know, I've been getting a few trophies, and it's kind of nice, you know, to come home with a trophy, but it's not the reason I go. Well, let's see, I got this from first place best car show. I was best in show at Clarissa days. This one here's an old one. This is one I got back when I got the trophy sticker on the car from drag racing, back at North Star Drag Strip, 1977. This one here was at Riverfest car show in Melrose. So it's just different car shows I've been to. So I've been offered a lot of money for it, but you know, money can't buy happiness. This to me is happiness. When I retire, I'm gonna really enjoy this a lot.
My name is Craig Lovold, and I own a 1988 VIXEN XC. It's definitely different. It's hard to say what it is, because they made the first ones were definitely an RV, but this one is a little bit different because it was outfitted more like a limo, so it's somewhere in between an RV and a limo. Well, they were made in Pontiac, Michigan. It's an American vehicle, but it has a BMW turbo diesel for the engine and a Renault 5-speed manual transaxle. So it was kind of a hodgepodge of parts that they pulled it together. The whole thing was kind of pieced together, but then it was a custom fiberglass shell that they put over that, and wind tunnel tested it. It's actually slightly more aerodynamic than a C5 Corvette, according to the wind tunnel testing, and gets 30 miles to the gallon on the highway at 55 miles an hour. So it was kind of a really different vehicle and fits in a normal garage. It's just under 7 feet tall. It's lightweight, 6,000 pounds. It was really different than most of the RVs of the day. Airplane-like door. And inside, it's been restored pretty much the way it was when it was originally built. It's got a tiny little bathroom here, just big enough to fit a toilet with a little privacy extension there so you have enough room, but very compact, keeping the whole inside very open. And then this is as it was originally with the little wet bar. These seats fold together in front here to form another bed. There was a little black and white TV originally in there, but of course we added a modern stereo and a flip down TV for movie nights, and then upgraded the electronics, but otherwise this is much as it would have been back in 1988. there's a permanent bed in back over the engine, and then the seat here can flip down to fit a larger bed and make things fall down. And then we added this air conditioning unit on the wall just for our own comfort. But the overhead lights and all of this is the way that it originally was from the factory. So they had reading lights because it was intended for executives to sit here in comfort and travel and sip their champagne or whatever. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty much as it was intended. Because this was an XC, it wasn't intended for camping necessarily, and so it had a secondary air conditioning unit in the back for the interior, but that only ran with the engine. So when you're parked, there wasn't any heat or air conditioning. So we added that just to make it more comfortable for camping. Actually, it's a standard household type mini split air conditioner with the outside part on the bumper and then the inside part mounted in place of one of the lights that were there. I grew up hearing my mom talk about the little BMW Isetta that she had before I was born. And so I'd always kind of kept an eye out for one and thought it would be fun if I could ever find one. Every morning I had a little routine that ran, kept me up to date if any of them popped up. And one morning it popped up on Craigslist north of the Twin Cities. It said, don't call before 8. So at 7:45, I called them and I was on the road with a trailer on the way there. This had been sitting in a shed for 40 years. That was a pretty good find. So it's a German car, and they were very popular in Europe, and it was kind of known as the car that saved BMW. After World War II, in Germany had a very depressed economy, and people could not afford to buy a car. So BMW came up with this vehicle as an inexpensive car that people could afford to buy. And then they also imported a few thousand of them to the United States, but they weren't as popular here. The car was actually designed by an Italian company called ISO, and they made refrigerators amongst other things, and that's why the front looks a lot like a 1950s refrigerator door. The steering column is hinged and connected to the door, so it kind of swings away as you open it to give you a little more room to get in. That's how you get in and out of it, is you climb in through there, and if you ever get stuck in the door, it's got a nice sunroof you can climb out of, because it's just got the one door. It's a 300cc one-cylinder engine. The same basic engine that they were using in BMW motorcycles of the day. And it does have a hemispherical combustion chamber. Technically, it is a Hemi. The shift is actually on the left-hand side, and the gear pattern is backwards. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So you're using your left hand and you're shifting in a backwards pattern. So it does take a little while to get used to. You're not going to race anybody, but it gets around. I've had it up to 50. It can get there. It just takes a while. The promotional pictures showed a family with like 2 adults and a small child, and I always thought those must be really tiny people, because you can get 2 people in there, but they got to be kind of friendly. It's been a hoot. I actually have another one too that I'm doing a full restoration on. I'm going to keep this one as is, because it's kind of earned its dents and dings and stuff. And the other one was too far gone, so that one will be a complete restoration. So hopefully have a fleet of 2 after a while.
I am Bruce Van Sloun. I'm the president of the Antique Car Run. It's a lot of work, believe it or not. So this commemorates the London to Brighton run, and that was done to celebrate the removal of restrictions on speed of the cars in England. So prior to the revocation of the red flag law, they had all kinds of restrictions. You had, 8 miles an hour, you had to have somebody walking in front of you waving a red flag, and it was obviously put a lot of damper on the people who wanted to drive their cars around. So when they got enough power to change that law, there was a celebration, and so they drove from London to Brighton, which was 65 miles. And so in honor of that, we do the New London to New Brighton. We work on this run pretty much for an entire year. On this year's run, I'll be driving my 1907 Model S Ford, and that's the green one behind me there. And that's a very nice car, a nice car to drive. It's very reliable and a simple car to drive. The Model A Ford came out in 1903. That was the first car that Ford sold. Then they came out with the Model B, the Model C. They came out with a Model F, K, N, R, and S, and that's the Model S that I drive. And then they came out with the famous Model T. So a lot of people think that the Model T was the first Ford car that was ever made, and that's not true. It was the Model A in 1903. I was inspired, a very dear friend of mine, and I would sit and watch in New Brighton. We'd see all of these antique cars come in, and I was into cars, but I was into sports cars, and I'd see all of these crazy cars that would come in, 1-cylinder, 2-cylinder, and there's smoke billowing out, and steam cars, and it was, people would be grit in their oil-covered faces, and they were determined in it. I've got to have that. I've got to do that. That's, and some of them coming in at a blistering 12 miles an hour, limping in with one tire. It's just crazy. So I got to do that. So the London to Brighton starts in downtown London, and so you've got to fight London traffic all the way out. And the antique cars are very, very challenging. They're temperamental, so all that stop and go traffic is really, really hard to drive in. So yes, this is a bit easier, but it does get more challenging as we get into the city as well when we start driving with modern cars. We have pre-tours, and we use them for shakedown. For instance, this year we've had a number of cars that have experienced some problems, and so the goal is to kind of shake these things out, find the problems, identify them, fix them, hopefully.
Oh man, you welded that.
And get them everything all set, get them all tuned up for the big run on Saturday. That's one of the really fun things about this particular event is some of these are extremely rare cars, and it would be very unusual to see them in a museum setting. Here you're seeing them, they're running, and sometimes they're broken. So now you get to really get inside and see how the technology used at that particular time, that particular manufacturer's approach to a particular technical problem, sort it out. So, you know, everybody's willing to come in and get their hands dirty and sort stuff out. And we've got people that are making parts and cobbling stuff together. So it's quite a challenge. Getting 125 miles out of an antique car is quite an accomplishment. So this is on, if you're into really early cars, this is on a lot of people's bucket list to make that run. You wouldn't believe how much elation you get when you get over that run the first time, over that finish line. For 36 years, people have been coming from all over the United States and Canada. We've got people from England, we've had people from Australia. But this is a pretty unique run. There are a few younger people, and my daughter has been on this run, and we've got some young people on the run that, you know, they're in their 30s, that their family has been doing the run and they've inherited the car. There are some younger people that are doing it, but, you know, we'd love to see more younger people doing it.
I'm Donald Korstad from Sacred Heart, Minnesota, and I own a 1928 Chevrolet. It's an AB National Coach. Well, I think it was a pretty standard family car at the time. At that time, Chevy, I think, had about 12 different models of car. And so it was interesting when I bought parts too, because once in a while they weren't interchangeable. They did have bucket seats in that car. That's something that when I was a kid they thought was kind of neat to have bucket seats. No, don't have seat belts. It originally didn't have signal lights either, but for safety reasons, I did put them on. It's a 4-cylinder, 35 horsepower engine. In the 1929, they came out with a 6-cylinder, but this was the last of the 4-cylinders in Chevrolet. And the interesting thing about the Chevrolet, in 28, they came out with brakes on all 4 wheels. In 27, they only had on 2 wheels. I think you could probably cruise about 45. I don't think you could quite do 50. 45 would be humming pretty good. Well, I took the body apart piece by piece. So everything was epoxied both inside and outside. It's all oak. And yeah, the floor is all wood, and of course all the framing around the body is all wood. I had to order a kit, and there's a couple of different places you can get kits for 28 Chevrolets. I had never done body work before, so I signed up for the 2-year course at Bridgewater. Being an old fellow, of course, I got it at a cut rate. But I took the 2-year course, and then I still had more work to do on the car, so I signed up for the specialty course, and then I finished it up there in that course. It was kind of a fun project. The last car show I went out in Sunburg, there was one that had not been restored, and it was really good shape. There's another one I know of that hasn't been restored, but he takes it in a parade every year. So yeah, there's a few 28 Chevys out there. I usually go with the trailer and take it wherever I'm going to go, and then I probably will put it in a parade or so next year, but I haven't done that yet. This is the first year I even showed it any place. I would like to go on the 4-cylinder tour sometime, and I'd like 4-cylinder would be good to be on, because if the newer cars with their 6s or whatever, I wouldn't be able to keep up. Like I say, the real fun part was really doing the restoration. Now I show it off a little bit, but that's not the same. Well, I know my son wants it, and I got a daughter that's interested too. So we'll have to see. Maybe they'll have to fight over it.
It's a 1912 Hudson, Model 33, 5-passenger touring car. I can trace the history back to '49, the family I got it from. They took it in on trade for moving a granary. And so at one time I know they didn't know exactly what the car was. So Kelvinator and Hudson merged and created American Motors. They wrote a letter to American Motors asking what they had, and they got a reply back, which I have all that documentation, and telling them about the car, kind of the build sheet. The one thing that was ordered special was the type of rim. It's got clincher rims on it. Normally they had straight side tires. This has got clinchers. All that was detailed in that build sheet. And they had it, the same family had it up till 5-6 years ago. So from '49 till say 2018, 2017 when I bought the car. And fortunately, nobody has painted it. Nobody has reupholstered it. I have the original top. I just took the top off because it was deteriorated. I need it for a sample when I do put a top on it. And as long as I'm alive and own that car, it will stay just like you see it. I'll never ever paint that car. It's worth way more in original condition than it would be if I repainted it and restored it. Well, it was common in the day. It's okay, so it's a Model 33. It was common for various makes to advertise their horsepower. So this is a 33 horsepower car. They bought the motor from Continental. Continental was a big engine builder back in the day. One thing that's interesting about it, it's got 2 main bearings. So it's only got a front main bearing and a rear main bearing. And there's no fan for the radiator. The flywheel on that car is at the back of the motor, and the spokes in the flywheel are at a bevel. And so what that does, it creates the draft to suck air through the radiator. So that's a little different. I don't know of another car that did that. I did maintenance, that's a good way to word it. I did maintenance, but it ran when I bought it, and it ran just fine. But I've done some things to check some things over, just to make sure everything, you know, like today I went all by myself on a 90-mile drive to go see an aunt of mine on her birthday. And so I want, you know, it's nice to feel secure that your car will make it that far. all Model Ts are left-hand drive. So this is a 12 and it's still right-hand drive. So various manufacturers varied their thoughts on that. So we got a right-hand drive, we got spark lever and a throttle lever. Down on the floor you can see there's 3 pedals. The middle one is the throttle. Here's the speedometer. This is a carburetor adjustment for lean and rich. This is the ignition switch where it'll run on both battery and mag. Another thing that's a little different, other cars had this but it wasn't very common. This is a disco self-starter. Prestolite also made one. It's a switch that put the distilled acetylene inside the combustion chamber, and then when you put this on battery, put the ignition switch on battery, it in theory would ignite, and so then it would start the car. You didn't have to get out and crank it. This is an oil sight gauge. It tells you it's pumping oil. It pumps the oil up into the gauge and then it dumps it back into the front of the motor, and then it lubricates everything underneath the motor, the bottom end of the motor, and starts the whole process all over. You can see this tag right here. It says H.L. Moyer Automobile Company, Des Moines. And if you Google that, you'll see that they were a Hudson dealer. The time frame, the correct time frame. So I'm sure this car was sold new in Des Moines, but it ended up in Wyndmere, North Dakota. And I know it was in Wyndmere in 1949. I don't know how much sooner than that. So I bought it from that family. That family had it from 49 till about 2017, 2018 when I acquired it. I was thrilled when I got to finally see the car. I knew about the car for 30 years, but I never actually saw it until I started dealing on it and looking at it. And I was very happy, very fortunate to get to be the caretaker of this car for as long as I decided to own it.
My name is Michelle Suter. I'm from Wilmer, Minnesota, and I own a 1954 Nash Metropolitan. It's definitely a little unique, different. A lot of people ask if it floats, like the Amphicar, and it's not, it would sink. It looks like a little bathtub, a unibody little bathtub. It was made in England for the US market, so that's something that makes it different. It was the first smaller car of the day. It was marketed for women as a second car. In '53, they called it the NKI Custom because it was kind of a prototype. And then it was shipped over here, and then they put the Nash emblem on it. It was sold at the Nash dealers. The price of the car in '54 was $1,445, but the convertible was just a little more, $1,469. So just like a few dollars more and you could get a convertible. It's been restored. My dad restored it for us. He thought it would be an easy car since it was smaller, and he had been doing cars for years. He's in the business, well, is still in the business. It's been nearly 50 years. We did need to restore it, you know, it needed paint, and my dad redid all the wiring in it. He put a different engine in it for us, mainly because I have never driven a stick shift before, a manual, so he did that for me. It usually had a 1200cc engine in it, but we put a Chevy Chevette engine in it. And then we painted it a different color. It was all dark green. We just wanted a lively color. And this color is called Croton Green. So we call it Sweet Pea because when we first met, my husband and I, people called us 2 peas in a pod, referred to us as that. And so I knew I wanted to put that on our license plate. So it's 2PZNPOD. And it's a small car. We have the paint, green and white, and I thought, well, kind of looks like a little pea. And then after the Tommy Rowe song from 1962, Sweet Pea, and we just really loved that song, and my husband always called me Sweet Pea also. So that's why we named the car Sweet Pea.
Originally, it would have been a 1200cc engine with a 3-speed manual transmission. So the engine would have had 42 horsepower, so not very fast, but they say in theory it would go up to 73 miles per hour, although I don't know that you'd want to necessarily drive it that fast. And I think it went from 0 to 60 in about 28 seconds. But now it has a Chevette 4-cylinder, which is more than enough because you don't need to go very fast in this car.
I also own a 1957 AMC Metropolitan.
That is Ziggy. The story behind that, there's a few aspects to it. One is my wife had a children's book when she grew up. It was Ziggy and His Music Box, I think. And the color of that book is pretty much very close to the color of Ziggy here. And then there was also the cartoon character Ziggy. But then the person that we bought Ziggy from, his last name was Ziegler. So then it just all kind of came together for the name of the Ziggy. And we bought it from her father's friend. We call it tootling. So we like to tootle around, just go around the lake, and 30 to 45 miles an hour is a great speed for these cars.
And we like to go to like the A&W in the summer and do the cruise in there like once a month, and just car shows around the area. But hopefully everybody will still enjoy them for years to come. Yeah, we love it.
I'm Paul Schaeffer, and I'm from Valley City, Ohio. Okay, this is a 1908 Ford Model S Roadster. The Model S was the last of the NRS, the alphabet, they call them the alphabet Fords before the Model T. This is the last right-hand drive Ford. The Roadster was the dressed up version of the Model Ns and the Model Rs. It had skirted fenders, has the mother-in-law seat in the back. The roof was an option. The windshield was an option. This car's been in my family since 1948. My dad bought it from a local Ford dealer in '48 during World War II when they had no cars to sell. They had this in their showroom just to take up space, and after the war it got pushed out into a shed, and my dad found it and he bought it for $150. And it was an absolutely used up car, but it was all there. Crankshaft was broke. It was just wore out from stem to stern. Whoever owned it used it up and probably traded it in for a Model T. It's 4-cylinder, L-head, 18 horsepower. It has a mechanical oiler. Has a timer rather than a distributor. There's an ignition coil for each individual cylinder, and they're in the wood box on the dashboard. It has handholds on the side to access the connecting rods for service. The flywheel's on the front of the engine, which also serves as a cooling fan. My dad in the 50s did some work on it and got the engine kind of fixed up, and when I got older I started working on them and had it running. It wasn't restored in 1988 and was driving around our yard, and my dad came out and got in it and we went for a ride down the road, and he turned to me and said, "I've owned this car for 40 years, never thought I'd have a ride in it. It's the ride of a lifetime." And believe it or not, the next day he died of a heart attack. So it kind of became a mission to get it restored and running and looking nice, and have some good friends that helped me make that happen. In 2008, I had the misfortune of being on a tour and meeting a young kid who was picking his cell phone up off the floor of his car, and he came left to center and hit the front left wheel and spun the car around in the road, and it dug into a yard. I was by myself, fortunately, and didn't get thrown out, but it completely ruined the car, and it was apart for about 9 years before we got everything fixed and back together. But this is the result. It's a better car today probably than it was before the accident because of all the new parts I could get to put on it. This is an ignition coil box. This is made by Heinz Company. There's 4 ignition coils in there, 1 for each cylinder. And they may start or it may not, but you'll hear them buzz. So each coil, when it buzzes, is firing. They sound like a mess of mad bees as you're going down the road. It's like a lot of automotive technology, it's all recycled. The modern cars today, they've gone back to having a coil on each spark plug with an individual coil for each cylinder, which is just 1908 technology recycled. And we've toured a lot with it. It's been up here, 1992 is the first year we brought it up here for the New London to New Brighton run. We did it 92 through 96. Then my kids got older and had to quit coming up here for a while. And in 2015 we came back and started touring again up here with it. I've worked on this car since I was a teenager and just learned a lot about them, and it's always been fun to tinker. My friend let me drive his 1905 Model B Ford earlier this week. He had to leave because he was ill, but that is only one of 7 cars that exist, and he let me drive it, and I drove it 40 miles yesterday and So that's probably the most miles a Model B Ford has driven in over 100 years. But it was fun. It's neat. It's a privilege to be able to work on these, but you're only caretaker for a piece of history. You save them and hopefully pass them on so somebody else will take care of it.
My name is Scott Tofte. I own Tofte Auto and Sales and New World Salvage in Madison. New World Salvage is a niche market salvage company where we sell specialty vehicles, and our focus really is muscle car era vehicles, early 60s through early 70s. A couple variations of Camaro, first generation and second. First generation would run 67 to 69, and then the second generation car 70 to 73, I mean, as far as... And then the range exceeds that a little bit, 55, 6, 7 Chevrolets, and maybe some newer muscle car things that might run into the late 70s. But the main focus is early 60s to early 70s, and primarily steel bumper cars. Chevy 2 Nova wagons, 65 and 67. The Mustang Mach 1, that's was a nice car prior to the crash. More of the same stuff. One street rod, that's a 47 Chev, otherwise second gen Camaro and some Novas sprinkled in here. A classic 65 Chevy hardtop on top of the trailer deck there. And then when it comes to pickups, the C-Series in the 60s are pretty hot stuff. Madison's located midway between the major metroplexes, I guess, of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Fargo, and Sioux Falls. We're 150 miles west of Minneapolis, we're 150 miles south of Fargo, we're 135 miles north of Sioux Falls, so that's where we lie. We're about 10 miles from the South Dakota border. Growing up in the 60s and the 70s, muscle cars were quite prevalent, so my first encounters with the young guys who were buying that stuff and putting it on the street, I was impressed, you know. I liked the noise, and I liked the speed and the spinning tires and everything else, you know. And then I just I picked that up, and then that's what I wanted to drive. I didn't want a family four-door sedan. I wanted something that would go really fast and really loud and sideways if I needed it to, you know. I started with that stuff, and then it wasn't long. I was taking it apart and putting it back together and modifying it. Just having a good time with it. Some of these old photos, I mean, some of these date back to when I was literally still on the farm, and I was actually doing some farming with my dad. Other pictures here of my first location in Lewisburg, first building I ever rented where I was on my own, and 69 Camaro that I had done that brings back some memories. It was one of my favorite cars. As crazy as it sounds, I dream about still owning this car occasionally. It must have left an impression on me. Plenty of stories to tell that just from driving that car and having fun with it. So New World Salvage is a sideline to this business, and it's like I say, the focal point there is muscle car era stuff. So we're buying and reselling. We deal heavy in projects. We also have quite a number of parts cars, quite an inventory of parts and parts cars. So there are a certain number of these cars, unfortunately, that are hit hard enough that are coming in where they part out, and we'll be disassembling a certain amount of that stuff and then making parts available. So this is a 72 Chevelle. It's a big block car. It came out of the Houston, Texas area. The car could go two different directions, parts or rebuild. I'm 90% sure the car will rebuild just because of what it is. To the layman, he might look at that and say, man, you're crazy. There's no rebuilding that thing. It's insane. Some of these, if you have the expertise to do the work, you can build a car and save some money. Maybe a lot of it's personal satisfaction, but some of them you can save some money on too. The big block Chevelle is probably a big deal, and it's a factory air car, so that's going to be attractive to somebody that's looking forward to having one or building one. It's not for everybody. It's not something that you can, it's not something that you're going to buy and take to a shop and say, fix this for me. That's not going to work. Dollar-wise, it's not going to pencil out. Then, if you're that guy, you need to go pick up a magazine, find a car, buy the car, drive the car. But these cars are mainly for people that have the expertise to put them together. Most of the inventory we have sells as is. So it comes in, it gets inventoried, it goes out, we remark it, somebody else buys it, they take it home, they build it.
Wheels, Classics, and Collections is made possible in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota, and by members of Pioneer PBS. Thank you.